Welcome to the EmpowHERment Show, a podcast designed to empower women like you to take control of your lives, make informed decisions, and redefine success on your own terms, beyond the noise of influencer culture.
Hello. Welcome back for another episode of our podcast. As usual, it is me, Adama. I am here with my two fabulous co-hosts, Maddie and Samantha. And today we have a very, very special guest with us because we are going to talk about something that is very timely. We are going to talk about crisis leadership, climate, politics, and women as first responders in disaster situations. And we have a really amazing guest today. His name is Justin Knighten. He's a dear friend. He has been at the forefront of emergency management. He previously served as the associate administrator at FEMA under the Biden administration.
And Adama, what does FEMA stand for, in case people don't know?
Oh, yes. Justin, I am going to let you talk all about that. Just as, actually right now, let me just turn it over to you and you can tell us about yourself and about FEMA and what you did there.
Absolutely.
And what FEMA stands for.
FEMA stands for the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Emergency managers in government at all levels, as you all know, love acronyms. So I will try my hardest to not use any acronyms. In fact, when I started at FEMA, I was handed a several 100-page long book of all the acronyms that the agency uses. And I took that book and threw it in the trash. And I'll never use acronyms as the chief communicator for the agency. And no one else should either. You know, it was a challenge every day, but we got through it. And that speaks to the work I did at FEMA. I ran the Office of External Affairs, have the honor and privilege of working with such phenomenal federal service leaders who every single day show up for the American people across all states, territories, 574 federally recognized tribes, and every local jurisdiction to make sure that we keep a focus on national resilience before disasters, that we have the mechanisms in place to support all levels of response during them, and then we have the ability to work across government in a well-coordinated fashion on recovery after them. And before that, I had the pleasure of serving Governor Gavin Newsom, the emergency services agency there to help with preparedness campaigns and really helping to engage underserved at-risk populations and some pretty historic wildfire responses the last few years, including the pandemic, which we are all now disaster survivors because of that.
No, the ties that bind. Yes.
And thank you for clarifying that. I think we forget sometimes that other people don't pay attention to politics as much as we do, probably because they have lives. But yeah, anyway, let's move on.
So natural disasters, it's something that is becoming kind of a new normal. In 2023 alone, the U.S. experienced over $28 billion disasters. And that number, we know it's going to continue to rise, especially with climate change. And it feels like we are definitely in a different cycle with how disasters happen, everything from hurricanes to tsunamis to earthquakes, right? We also know FEMA is undergoing a lot of changes right now. DOGE has been, working its dubious magic to cut budgets all across the federal government. And we know there's been a lot of cuts at FEMA. So we'd kind of love to hear from you about your thoughts on what that workforce reduction might look like, how that might impact disaster preparedness and relief efforts going forward. Love to hear kind of an insider's perspective on that.
Absolutely. Well, let me just first start off by saying thank each and every one of you for caring about this topic. Thank you for having a podcast like this to have conversations that are really important and hopefully make them a little bit more fun and accessible on some topics that are really complex and challenging, like disasters. This is really a difficult area of topic because of the death, darkness, and destruction often associated with people's lived experience or what they see on TV or what they know about these events. So as I say to my friends, I'm still fun dinner party guest. I'm still a hoot. And even though I can get into the darkness sometimes on the topic, we'll try to make it accessible for your listeners. The reality is that these disasters were becoming far more complex, expensive, life-threatening, and frequent. You don't have to live under a rock, or even if you did live under a rock, to know that watching a news cycle on any given day, these events are happening around the world, and they're becoming more complex. The last several years, while at FEMA, we're seeing, disasters that are completely wiping out communities. We're seeing historic flooding events that are getting to places that haven't had them before. Everyone remembers the historic wildfires in Maui that literally spread because there was an offshore hurricane. And oh, by the way, 2 weeks later, California experienced its first hurricane, Hurricane Hillary. Oh, by the way, during that hurricane, when it made landfall, because of the pressure that hurricanes create in places that have a earthquake fault line, it triggered an earthquake in Southern California. It's quite literally called a hurricane. So
I didn't even know that. I didn't realize that's like the logical progression or scientific progression of what happened.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you remember the Taylor Swift concert, last year, and I think it's in Seattle, there was so much energy and movement on the earth that I think it triggered a very small earthquake, even during a concert. It's like, this is really the science of our earth. And so all that's to say that it's getting more complicated. In addition to climate change, we're getting cyber attacks all the time and becoming more and more of a threat landscape that is challenging. Also, our ailing infrastructure. Think our ports and our roads and our water sewage treatment facilities. These are things that around the country are not being invested in or modernized and are becoming very fragile to very small things like rain events and other things that are completely taking them out. We saw this in Jackson, Mississippi a couple years ago. And then as the world's international landscape becomes more complicated, we have to continue to focus on national security threats, right? Terrorist attacks and et cetera, to continue to loom large on the horizon as we look at future risks. All of this means that regardless of what the politics are, regardless of who's in office today, the world is very complicated. And if we don't have an effective risk strategy to make sure that we are thinking about both the risks that are bad, as well as the risks that we need to take that can lead to good outcomes and opportunities to innovate, to grow, to problem solve in new ways, we're going to continue to be in a very complicated reality. We're 30 seconds on, the points about what's happening in Washington, D.C. I was really proud to work at an agency, FEMA, where every day we talked about people. What do people need? People being at the center of our work. And you're seeing a lot of debates right now about what's happening to FEMA, what people want to do with FEMA. In some cases, they want to dismantle FEMA, reorganize FEMA, restructure FEMA, do away with FEMA altogether. But people are really missing from that conversation what people are actually going to need when that deadly tornado hits, or as we approach hurricane season in a couple of months, or as we continue to face life-threatening wildfires. The agencies being gutted, the staff are either being pushed out, fired, or the environment is so complicated and complex and toxic that they're leaving, and we're losing the talent pool that we've relied on for a generation and decades. I feel very nervous about what that means for human life and communities around the country, and what's in store if we keep pursuing this path.
Well, thank you. It's really interesting. When we were doing our kind of prep for this, you mentioned that this is not the first time this has happened to FEMA, and that there were some pretty catastrophic results, and that we can actually tell from point A to point B what a defunding like this means. And do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, as a student of history, kind of go back a little bit to understand the future. And so I think everyone on this call knows, and most of your listeners will remember the horrible events of 9/11. Oh my God, just terrible events of 9/11 that triggered the then Bush administration to create what is now known as the Department of Homeland Security. And as part of the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, FEMA was an independent agency, was pulled under the Department of Homeland Security. And as part of that effort, a lot of its authorities and response capabilities were gutted. We're gutted. And FEMA is an all-hazard agency, which means if it's a terrorist attack, a tornado, a flooding event, or sea level rise, we have funding to prioritize the all-hazard landscape of our nation. And under the action of taking FEMA under the Department of Homeland Security, all of our grants actually stopped focusing on all hazards and prioritized on exclusively terrorist attacks. And so, years later, when Hurricane Katrina was making landfall, and let me just point out, Hurricane Katrina was a full system, full sector, all levels of government catastrophe. There's no one entity responsible. It was just bad across the board. But when you look at what had been gutted at FEMA before, FEMA was now, not independent, reporting directly to the president, but under an agency. And we stopped prioritizing all hazard grants to build up those seawalls and those levees. It kind of leaves you in a place of no wonder something like this happened. And we're not walking back towards that. We are sprinting back towards that.
That's such a challenge. I mean, I work with, just in terms of clients, I have insurance clients, I have manufacturing clients, we have clients that work in the housing space, and there's so few of our clients that are not in some way impacted, right? Just by the volume of what has happened recently in LA. And even when you look about just the logistics of getting people out and getting service, like the insurance adjusters and the folks that are coming to respond and clean things up. It's so many homes and it's so much devastation that there are physically not enough human bodies. I mean, thank God that we have some technology and innovations that allow us to get in there and see what's going on more readily. But at that scale, LA being on fire and that devastation, never mind the human impact and the trauma impact, which is so significant, just the functional logistics of how do we get eyes on the ground? How do we see what's going on? How do we respond to the insurance claims? How do we get things rebuilt? And how do we do it under arguably, what are some of the most complex regulatory conditions in the country? And people are frustrated, right? Never mind the overarching traumatization of the event itself, right? And the more that we see that, especially in these heavily populated areas nationwide, I mean, we have to understand that it is going to happen more and more increasingly.
Absolutely. Samantha, you bring such a good point about mentioning insurance. Those of us in the disaster space always say that resilient communities are insurable communities and are communities that have insurance. That's your first line of defense to mitigate against these threats. What I suspect will happen is that insurance companies during catastrophic events, right? Not all disasters reach the federal level, right? All disasters are local and stay at the local level. It pop up to the state level if they need capacity and resources. They only become federal in those very catastrophic moments. But in those catastrophic moments, the whole system is strained. The whole system is relying on each other to step up and step into solutions. And that includes the insurance industry. Federal dollars roll out very quickly in the beginning of a disaster at the federal level. And we've worked very hard to create that in that initial response to recovery window to make sure that funds start flowing. For insurance, that takes some time to call your insurance company, get your adjusters to come out and kind of look at the damage and kind of figure out what exactly you're owed. They kind of relied on, in a lot of cases, the federal funding system to kind of help reduce that pressure cooker so that they had the capacity to do that in the way that they need to for all their clients and all their customers. If that federal resource goes away and that flow of money goes away, that in-between window becomes far more complex and high stakes, and I don't know if we have the political will to support that.
I think that's right, and I think at the end of the day, as much as there's a human impact on the ground, there is a community of businesses and organizations and agencies that have to come together to make sure that those communities, can be supported, can be resilient, and can rebuild. And what you see right now is so much vitriol, especially online, right on X, towards the agencies themselves, to the companies that are rebuilding, to the government agencies that are trying to help on the ground, to law enforcement that are helping people. It's like, I get it. You're frustrated, but it becomes this all out assault, and it almost deters people from, being in those public service positions, being in the type of corporate jobs where they actually can make a meaningful impact, when we very much obviously need all of those folks, not only there in large numbers, but working, in synergy and in tandem.
Absolutely. And there's definitely places and room for improvement and to be sharper, better, tighter, faster, right? All those things. Like is it Daft Punk, that band, better, stronger, faster, whatever. Yeah, thank you for the cultural clarity. That's necessary in disaster work. No emergency manager at any level will tell you otherwise. We have to do that. And it's not like, patting ourselves on the back. No one does that. We plow into the next crisis. But to your point, if we're not creating an environment in which the private sector, the public sector, the faith-based communities and nonprofits are going to step into this work because it's so toxic, and the call outs prevent people, when you're the next person to be in a situation in which you've lost your home and a loved one and you have no options, and you just want to stare someone in the eye who has you, like, I got you, I'm going to help you, I'm going to figure this out with you, but they're not there, and you're staring into an abyss of nothing. God bless us.
Yeah, I feel like that is, to me, that is like the most terrifying thing when I see some of these headlines about, whole departments being shuttered and budgets being cut. I think about that because I worked for a very large insurer for almost 5 years in California. And, when a disaster hits, they do have to have access to get in. And the first things that happens a lot of times is there's funding made immediately to get people in to clear a path, right? Mm-hmm. If it's a hurricane, if it's a tornado, if it's whatever it is, you've got to clear a path so that people can actually get back to where they live, so claims adjusters can get in. And a lot of that is taken care of by federal funds. And so the speed of those funds is really critical.
Absolutely.
Talking about, some of the challenges then, I feel like in some of these disaster situations, we do see people that kind of rise to the top, even though it feels like the media is, always looking for like who messed up, who caused this, who was the problem. There's the Mr. Rogers quote, look for the helpers. And so I feel like we're going to have to get a lot better at being helpers, at being resilient. And I feel like probably women are just better at this anyway. I do truly believe that. But I mean, I feel like I say this like every episode. But I feel like this is something that women are better at being community organizers and leaders and doing a lot of the grassroots activity that really does result in more resilient communities. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what individuals should be doing to be more resilient.
Absolutely. I think that you hit the nail on the head, as they say. When I think about my first exposure to crisis managers, and I think about what I now know to be true about emergency managers, I can't help but think about my grandmother, my mom, all my tias, and my older cousins who all kind of were that kind of gut check on, getting prepared, on thinking about what's next that we have to get ready for, building community with the family, but also neighbors, trying to be resourceful. Like, how can we use this innocuous thing 8-10 different ways in case we need it, and have it in our car just in case, right? Like, these are the people that not only give us love and caregiving and systems of support. These are the phenomenal people in our lives, if we're lucky to have them, to really be thinking about, the things that we need to just live and get by are the very things that we need to be thinking about to survive a crisis and a disaster scenario.
Totally agree. So can you give us some thoughts on things that we should be doing as individuals to prepare ourselves, in the horrible, if a disaster does strike? Like I said, I used to work for an insurance company. So one of the things that it's like burned into my brain. Every month I take a video through my whole apartment so I know exactly what my belongings are. And that way, if I ever have to have a claim or file a claim, I don't have to fight because I actually have video of what my belongings were. So any hints that you can give us, things that we should be doing to prepare ourselves?
Absolutely. So a couple things, right? I love the idea and the strategy of filming your apartment. Absolutely. That's a great one. If you have a house, then documenting the outside of your home as well, because in case there's damage, you have to show before and after. This was before the storm. This is after the storm. They connect it to the storm. So
it was my neighbor's tree, not mine.
That fell on my house, girl. I know that was at me. Oh yeah, 100-year-old oak fell through the house, knocked the house so hard I was on the other side of the house, and it threw me down onto the bed through the kitchen.
God. Wow. Glad you're still
here. I don't know how to respond.
Well, also maintain your trees, folks. I'll tell you that's another free hint from the insurance girl.
No, I'm just side-eyeing all the neighbors' trees now.
Yeah.
Well, in Sacramento and places that have a lot of trees, LA, city of trees. I remember my hometown, San Francisco, other parts of the country, like right, looking at trees. You also have to prepare to evacuate. And the worst time to be thinking about what to do is during a crisis. So everyone needs to get a piece of paper today or after listening to this podcast conversation, get a piece of paper and write down all the people that you love that you don't remember their cell phones numbers because they're in your phone and we don't use dialing phones anymore. Write down all their numbers and their contact information and then call them or text them and have them do the same for you. So if something happens, you can contact each other and then do a checklist of all the things that you want to take with you if you have to evacuate your home, and evacuate your home with the premise that your whole home and your whole life is going away. What are the things you want to take with you? Certainly the fundamentals, copies of your insurance, your home mortgage paperwork, right? Your health information, your passport, but also the things that sometimes people forget: family photos, family heirlooms, things that are irreplaceable that insurance will never be able to cover, things that you just need to have with you because it's your heart, your soul, and your life, right? And then just like in a crisis, you don't think about what to do in a crisis. You don't build relationships in a crisis. You have to build the relationships beforehand. So if you haven't talked or built a relationship with your neighbors just to say hi and for them to know who you are, whether it's across the street, down the river, or across the apartment building, you need to do that today. Introduce yourself, say hello, because you need to start having a conversation around how you're going to help each other in a crisis. Everyone thinks a firefighter's going to knock on their door and carry them to safety. That's not going to happen anywhere for no one. And so,
I live on the 11th floor, so I don't know how that would happen for me.
Exactly. I mean, listen, that's a great idea. I'd love a firefighter to like carry me out into safety. Like, oh my God. But like, that's not going to happen. So we got to make sure that we for ourselves and each other.
Two things. And I think just like that, what you have said brings to mind for me. I think one, just being aware of what the risks in your area are, right? So I think, I grew up in the East Bay. San Francisco people always think, or the earthquakes. But I know from working in insurance and otherwise that actually we have an expansive species of non-native invasive eucalyptus trees all over San Francisco that environmental groups have prevented from being culled back. And they are highly, 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 highly flammable. And so just knowing what's in your community and sort of what your risks are, I think is so important. And then two, I struggle with it. I'm highly organized in a strategic way. I can tell you what could or should or might happen like 6 months down the road. I'm not so much organized in like the checklist and organizing my things way. I need apps for that. Like my ADD will eat me alive. And I will tell you though, one of the things that I appreciate about my daughter's father, my ex-husband, that man to this date has a laminated to-do checklist by the back door of like, here's what to get in case of an emergency. Grab these things. And it is there. It is hanging. It is readily available. And I always thought like, well, this is so silly. Like, who does this? Like, how often is but I mean, it's not. It really isn't when it comes down to protecting your family and yourself and your belongings. So even if it's outside of your comfort zone and you think it's unrealistic, I think just understanding the risks that are native to your area or likely to unlikely, and then kind of, okay, what's my reminder to myself so I don't find myself in that situation?
Because I think that's the scary part. I mean, growing up in Southern California, I lived through a couple ridiculous earthquakes. And now living in New York, we've had, strangely enough, an earthquake here, but also there's a ton of flooding and all kinds of other nonsense happens here. And anytime there's been an emergency, it goes out of your head. First of all, you're like, oh my God, is this an earthquake? And then you're like, oh God, it is an earthquake. And if it's not bad, you're kind of like, I can ride this out, but this is terrible. And when it is bad, though, all thought just goes out of your head. So the idea that you could then credibly put together a evacuation plan, get your family together and get belongings together, there is like almost no chance that you'll have the like mental wherewithal in that moment to be able to do it. So I love the idea of being very prepared.
Right. Because let me be clear, in a moment of emergency, if I think like the house is on fire or things are coming down, I'm chasing the animals around. I've been in a burning house before. I've had to chase a cat through one. Like, I know myself, I will, without thinking, like scoop the children, get the cat. And the rest, you know, credit cards, passport, driver's license. I'm just not that person. And I don't think I can train myself to be. And so also, like, know thyself.
Know thyself. And if you don't have the ability to go tactical into that checklist, looking at your local emergency management operation, local preparedness ready campaigns, Google disaster preparedness information, a lot of those lists have been created for you and are at least a starting point that you can use, or to at least have a conversation with folks that you live with. You know, Samantha, I love your point about knowing your risk. That is the very first thing about how to even start this process. I actually have a strategy for you, Christ, you strategy minded, big picture folks. You know, the exercise of thinking about the risks, thinking about what you might have to do because of the risks. Stay at your home, right? COVID or a power outage, evacuating. There's a fire coming, or incredible flooding, or evacuating and getting out to somewhere safe with other people. What are your exit routes? Do I rely on public transportation? Do I need to make sure that I have an infrastructure because I'm on a breathing machine and I need to make sure that I go to a place that also has power? So a lot of those things you're not going to be able to know until the crisis actually happens, but to be thinking about the risks, but also be thinking about, in a strategic way, your circumstance. If you have to stay, get out, get across town, and what you're going to have to do vis-a-vis those risks is a really good thing to do if you're a strategic person, to start just getting your head around what your situation is going to call for.
I will say, because I think I'm the only one on this podcast today of the four of us that has children. And one important thing that I realized early on, you know, is obviously like play to the strengths of your team. My ex-husband was very good at the sort of logistical checkpoints, but also give everyone in the house a job so that they know what to do in an emergency. And with little kids, you have to be really specific. So we had a fire alarm go off one night and it was late. My daughter was little, and I wasn't home, but she knew that her job was to get the cat. Like, get the cat and get outside. If there's a fire, get the cat, get outside. That's you, and we all get who's like littler than us. And my daughter never really liked pajamas. And so you could put them on her, but they'd be thrown across the room. And so it was the middle of the night. She woke up, you know, obviously she's not going to run out of the yard in her birthday suit. So her dad is trying to get her outside. She's sort of puttering around in the room. It's who knows what's happening. Is there a fire? Anyway, she put on like a full princess suit with a tutu and the cat. And then was like on the lawn in the tutu with the cat. And so anyway, give everyone a job that is age appropriate, but make sure they also understand, you know, the parameters of that and what
time constraints.
Yes, aces and spaces. Keep everyone in their aces and spaces. And if someone's inclined to put a tutu on to run out in the middle of a fire, maybe, you know, you got to talk to your people.
She's wearing a disaster tutu. I'm just saying.
A disaster tutu? That's hysterical. That reminds me, Sam, of the cat comment, not the tutu, because I'm about to talk about my husband. But you never know. He, December, I think it was, there was an earthquake. Yeah, we were about to leave for our honeymoon, the next day. And there was an earthquake, and it was kind of near, I think, more Concord. It wasn't close to Sam. It was Bay Area, but it was far enough away from us that I didn't feel anything. But it was big enough that there was a tsunami warning. And we were working from home that day because we were packing up our lives to go to Bali the next day. And we were being told to evacuate because Nathan, my husband, and I live right by Marina Boulevard. The ocean's right there. In San Francisco. And we were like, okay, well, we still have a lot of packing to do. We have 2 cats. I have calls for the next 3 hours. Am I supposed to just drop everything and go? And my husband growing up in New Zealand, if you got a tsunami warning, you took it seriously. You got to higher ground. But I was so no, this is not legit. I was pushing hard on him to be it's going to be fine. But sure enough, we get in our car with our 2 cats and we pack up these backpacks, including our passports, because we're still hoping we're going to go to Bali the next day. And we drive up Pack Heights and we go to the top of the Lion Steps. And we were looking out at the ocean. It was very flat. There were no waves. And I was looking at Nathan I had to cancel my whole afternoon for this. And really? But he was wouldn't you rather be safe than sorry though? What if there was? And I was you're right, as normally is. But it kind of got me thinking.
Notorious disaster.
I know. But I feel we were kind of talking about earlier how we are getting alerts a lot for these things. And it's almost like the boy who cried wolf, where you're okay, I'm not going to listen anymore because nothing's actually happened. But what about that time that it actually does? And
see, I'm the opposite. I am the opposite person. I am the person.
You are?
When a fire alarm goes off in a hotel, I get up immediately and I grab my stuff and I'm outside because
you're the example. I am not.
Let me be very clear. It's always the white people that are this is fine. I'll just stand here. No, I'm sure this is fine.
It's cold outside. I remember our apartment building used to have in San Francisco used to have fire alarms all the time. Every time would go outside and there'd be all these people who would I'm not going to go down.
That's the right thing to do, Adama. You are the.
I have to feel Adama's internal ethos is oh bitch, I'm not gonna get got.
No, this is what I say. I am pro-life, but really only my own.
Oh my God, especially your own. Especially,
I love this. My broader comment or question to you, Justin, though, is there's so many other people out there like Maddie who are dumb and don't listen to the authorities and don't want their lives to be disrupted. And I will fully own that. What do you tell the Maddies of the world?
I would say first listen to this podcast. A good introduction to this topic in a very accessible, direct way of learning how to keep yourself safe. I think you bring up a really good point about the intersection between travel and disasters. At FEMA, we actually set up a really innovative, first of its kind partnership between FEMA and TSA to have preparedness videos played for people who are in line waiting to be go through security and TSA lines around the country, because we don't think about disasters and the spaces and places that we visit, whether it's for work or to visit family across the country or to go to a foreign country. We're not thinking about not only knowing the risk, to Samantha's point about where you live, but also knowing the risk of the places where you're going.
I mean, I do, because my mom sends me all of the alerts as to why I should go to whatever country I'm planning to leave for, which is why I like to not tell her until the last minute anymore. But nonetheless, if you don't have a Pam in your life.
It's important. I was in Mexico before my background is all communications, and I was at a PR firm, and I was in Mexico City for a friend's birthday, and I was in a hotel. This is before I even thought about disasters, and insane earthquake hit Mexico City, and I was so overwhelmed because my building swayed back and forth so aggressively that I thought we were just gonna sway at one point and hit the ground. And y'all, I'm Catholic, but I don't pray very much. I know that's bad. I prayed a lot in this moment. More prayers happened in this moment than the last 10 years. And more prayers have happened since because I survived. But what I didn't do before I went to Mexico City is understand the risks, but also understand the steps to prepare and what to do in a crisis. Because in the US, we have very clear direction on what to do in an earthquake, right? You drop, you take cover, you go under something, and you hold on, right? That's generally for most people what you do. It varies if you're an older adult or if you have a disability to kind of respond to what your circumstance is. But in Mexico City, if there's an earthquake, the action is get out. The infrastructure isn't as consistent and building codes aren't the same everywhere.
And the whole city is built on a lake. So that's tough.
Love my motherland country, but you got to get out of the building. And so everyone ran the street. And I didn't know to do that. And that could have been
terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, so true. I feel like whenever we're traveling, you're just excited for the vacation you're going on and you don't think about like, oh, well, what if? And I will say when we went to Bali the next day, I was like, karma's going to be a real bitch and there's going to be a tsunami in this country. I'm just ready for it. And thankfully there was not, but I was very much prepared at that point.
Well, you're going to hate to hear this because I'm also one of those people that checks and makes sure I understand exactly where I'm going, that I understand like what physical infrastructure looks like. And
you're really making me feel
and I am like, I'm getting better. I am not always. I'm more like, again, like I will think about the geopolitical implications of what's happening in that country 6 to 24 months from now, but like not necessarily the immediate personal safety implications. And Adama is always like, bitch, are you dumb?
I feel like all of this comes from like a deep trauma for all of us.
That's how I know she loves me. It's like, but are you dumb? Because I don't want you to die. Do you?
I mean, I'm not going to die, so you should stick with me.
There's a lot of people out there who will not listen to authorities and acknowledge the realities about things. And it's scary to think about like what that could mean if and when another disaster happens, because
and to me that's really terrifying, because the more people who aren't compliant when we're in some kind of disaster situation, the more risk and liability it opens up, even for people who are trying to be compliant or who may need to be, right? And that to me is like the really scary part. Like I'm gonna leave a building with a fire alarm on because I don't want firefighters to not find me and come look for me and get hurt in the mission of trying to find me, right?
Right. That is hearing other people.
Yeah. I mean, that's a hugely important piece. I do a lot of work with first responders nationwide on mental health and substance abuse issues. And I will tell you, at the beginning of COVID, when it was just essential workers out in the daily working, people who weren't being safe, people who were, being harmed, those essential workers and their families were just, I mean, they were stressed to the hilt. We were taking calls from all over the country to get people treatment and support. And so there is this sort of, ancillary trauma that starts to expand exponentially. Like you were in a bad situation, you did or didn't plan, and that escalates to the people that came to help you. It escalates to their family who are worried about them and impacted if their health changes. And it becomes this like exponentially larger trauma event.
Yeah, it's a cascade. And I mean, that's why it's so difficult, because we are, we do have a social contract with each other. And whether people want to acknowledge or admit it, we have a social contract with each other as humans, as Americans, as Californians or New Yorkers, or, whatever it is. We have these contracts with each other. And I think it's really critical for us to support each other, especially when we're talking about disaster situations or, mass illness epidemics. I mean, that what the pandemic became with people, like we now have like laws against people wearing masks is just absolutely insane to me. Like
it's wild. And, that whole experience, the pandemic, especially being married now to somebody who's not from the United States, and how they treat these kinds of events and disasters, the individualist streak in America is so strong. And, I'm not going to lie, like I definitely have it myself. I think that's very clear from this episode. But as I've gotten older and as I've you know, realize how precious life is and how much your day-to-day actions impact other people, like that individualist streak becomes less appealing, to be quite honest. And yeah, the net is be like a Dama, everyone.
Well, what's also true is that the social science shows that when people get an alert on their phone, let's say to evacuate, they have to hear that message 7 different times before they'll actually evacuate, right? So, like, this is a huge barrier of not only releasing information, but getting people to change their behavior because of it. And that's like in a crisis scenario. One thing that, again, that FEMA people don't realize about FEMA and all that we do outside of this response to disasters is that we manage a whole infrastructure to make those alerts possible. And locals at the local level are responsible for the actual development of the message and pushing it out to the local community. And so these are hyper local messages coming from local officials. It's also increased trust in having the federal government message you directly, right? People are closer to those that they know. And even then, it takes about 7 times. That's an alert on your phone, the local radio reinforcing it, local television reinforcing it, your neighbor knocking on your door to say, we're being told to evacuate, we got to go. It has to happen 7 times on average for someone to actually take it, which is why when we were responding to Hurricane Helene last year, and we saw Hurricane Milton in the Gulf of Mexico brewing, the Gulf is like a hot tub for these tornadoes. It was at one point a Cat 5 hurricane coming towards Tampa Bay. When I said that would be devastating to the likes we have not seen in this country, we were all freaked out. That was a direct strategy and focus of the state of Florida and those of us in DC to get the message out, get out, leave, evacuate. And it was a very aggressive campaign that we ran, that we worked with local media to get the word out, because we knew that the social science called milling, this phenomenon that people need to get a message 7 times, could have cost lives. And we were very proud that we were able to work in direct alignment and in partnership with the state of Florida to get most people to evacuate and leave their homes. Thank God that hurricane de-escalated to a lower category and didn't quite hit the direct line of Tampa Bay, but we were also just very grateful that people evacuated and lives were saved because of it. So have a little grace on yourself around getting these alerts.
And also, I started this by saying I worked for an insurance company for 4 years. So, I mean, I saw firsthand, what catastrophic disasters looked like. I got to. I was on site at, emergencies in different places around the countries, and I saw the devastation. And when you start to see those things, you don't ignore tsunami warnings, and you don't ignore all of those things. Let me be clear. There's a whole host of things I won't do. I will never get in a helicopter. I will never.
Absolutely not.
I mean, like, I can tell you all kinds of things Adama will never
won't date men, apparently low ROI, but yeah.
Well, men will absolutely kill you. Hello. That's like the one thing that we know will kill women is men.
Adama's always like, I don't know, I think that dude might kill you.
He doesn't
We're
seem to
stay
know.
and protect and help. That's
We love you, Justin.
So, Justin, let me, you're doing a really amazing fellowship right now. Obviously, you are no longer working with the Emergency Management Association. So, like, associations. This is like my life.
Agencies.
Agencies.
I do have to build an association if it gets dismantled and funded in order to have something functioning. But nonetheless, it's currently still technically an agency.
Yeah. So can you talk to us about what you've been doing since you left FEMA? What is on the horizon for you? Because I know you're doing some cool stuff.
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. And thank you for asking about the IOP fellowship. So I knew that when I left this phenomenal opportunity that I've had to serve my country with some of the best federal service leaders that I've ever met, in any level of government, the folks at FEMA who are just, I can't say enough good things about, really just rock my world with how impressive they are and how dedicated they are. I knew that I wanted to take that experience and help inspire other people to enter a life in civic engagement, public service. I care a lot about service. My grandparents were immigrants from Mexico. They cared a lot about this country and the success and the health of this country and democracy. They were so proud to participate in voting and to volunteer and to engage. And my life purpose is to help fulfill their mission and their work with others and myself. And so learned about this phenomenal fellowship, the Pritzker Fellowship at the University of Chicago at the Institute of Politics. This is a group that David Axelrod actually started when he left the Obama White House, where every semester they bring fellows who either worked in public service or media or as an activist or in the business sector, who've done phenomenal things but connected to service in some way, to come spend some time in Chicago, where I am right now, to actually meet with students, to run symposiums, have dialogue and engagement around the issues that fellows worked on, but through the lens of what students are going to do after they graduate and the world that they're going to inherit when they graduate. And it's been just a phenomenal opportunity to meet with some really impressive young people who are so passionate and so eager to go shape the world across all the political spectrums under the sun, which is really cool. And for me to come in and say, it doesn't matter what you do next or where you go, you're going to have to lead in some way, one way or another in this disaster space. And we can't afford for you to fail. We can't afford for you to not get it right or to have some foundation in it.
Justin, I think one thing that's sort of becoming a theme, in fact, offline, we've talked about doing a future episode about it, but is just the importance of public service and the value of that, not only to the me, but the we. And, I'd love to hear a thought from you, just especially as the administration is changing, and some people may feel very excited about that. Some people are very upset about that. And just as we're in a moment of big change in how even the government is working at the federal level, what would you say to folks who are sort of curious and maybe skeptical about the value of getting into public service?
Listen, we can debate policy and program all day under the sun. Learned that in my time in Sacramento with the state legislature and governor. And that's a beautiful, healthy, and important thing. Everyone needs to sit at the table. Everyone needs to be part of that conversation. But the difference is that we actually have to create those tables and create those opportunities to engage and have seats at the table for people. And what I hope is that we take what we learn from this moment is that the dismantling, the destructing, the smashing is not healthy for our democracy. But fixing and solving and advancing is, protecting and thriving is. And so my message to everyone is, you have to serve. You have to serve at least one point in your life. You need to do something in public service. You need to go out and volunteer. You need to get a job on a commission. You need to go be actively involved in debating your point of view in legislatures. You need to get a job working for a mayor, a governor, a local official. You need to be a participant in the world that is there to support you. There's certainly a lot of examples of government not working for people and leaving people out, and unintentionally or intentionally shutting people out. But the more we have participation and we have the civic infrastructure that supports that, the healthier we're going to be. And y'all, I have worked for some phenomenal Republicans in my career who I respect, and I've worked for some phenomenal Democrats in my career who I respect, and everyone in between. This isn't about DNR, and in our country, we get so focused on DNR, and it's unhealthy and toxic. We have to focus on how are we going to come together in times of division and advance solutions. I know that sounds very Pollyanna, but I truly believe that, and I've seen it work, and I will be an advocate for that until the day I die.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that.
Justin for president.
Yeah.
No.
Girl, no, don't. Why are you going to put that on me?
The juju.
Oh, no.
Oh,
Well,
man.
thank you so much. Best of luck with this fellowship. When it's over, we'd love to hear how it went. Love to hear about who else is in this fellowship, like trying to figure out how
to meet good future guests with you.
Yes. Yes. So
Great.
love to know more about it.
Absolutely. Maybe I'll come on with another fellow, and we'll have some big fun conversation.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for the conversation. If there's just one or two things that you think people should do this week, you kind of mentioned some of them, but just as a quick refresher for some of our listeners, what are one or two things that they can do immediately to be more prepared, more resilient in the face of emergency?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on. Thank you for this conversation. It's so important. This conversation will absolutely save someone's life. So just thank you for making space. I'm grateful to all of you for that, and being open and honest with things that we all have to do to be better, myself included. I think the one thing I'll just say to leave people with is to not get so overwhelmed by the headlines around what's happening with FEMA, and really take this as a reminder when you see those stories, as a reminder that you need to get more prepared, that you don't have the ability to rest on your laurels or to assume that someone is going to step in for you. And that's never really been the case, but certainly more now moving forward. And so the most important thing is just to set the intention after you listen to this podcast that you are going to take at least one step to get more prepared, and you're going to continue that journey with yourself and your family and the people that you love and your neighbors, because it sounds easier than and kind of light and fluffy, but I'm letting you know that the people who've done that after disaster always say that they're so grateful that they took a step. They're so grateful that they had a conversation with their neighbor. They are alive today because someone checked on them in a crisis. And it breaks my heart, the millions of stories that happen year after year where those things don't happen. So please just set the intention and take one step.
Love that. And if people want to follow you, do you have an Instagram or Twitter that you would like, or X, that you would like to put out there?
Sure. Well, everyone can find me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, trying to stay positive and hopeful and forward moving on LinkedIn. And then I have an Instagram account at JT Knighten, where I'm a little bit more spicy. So,
No X, Justin.
I focus on those two platforms.
I have a lot of X's, so just, if you pick back up there, you let me know.
Well, I follow you on X because you're an icon on X and a voice of a generation on X, but I myself am not active on that.
I'm a voice of something, but I appreciate your follow. Your following.
That's amazing. We'll share all the handles so everybody can follow. But yes, echoing Adana, thank you again for coming. And if listeners, if you have not subscribed yet, we have more fun content and amazing guests coming your way. So be sure to subscribe. Justin, thanks again. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.